Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Prison Breaking with Sarah and Paul. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Paul, and today's episode is Brothers Keeper, the flashback episode. We get the backstory for many, many, many of our main characters before their lives at Fox River.
This was actually one of my favorite episodes of the show ever. Do you remember when you first read the script for this? Because I didn't know it was coming.
I didn't know it was coming, so no. I don't remember it. And but I remember that, and we're lucky that today we have Greg Yaitanes on, who directed this episode, because when you throw a flashback episode at 9 actors in the 16th episode of a show where they've been playing characters and then say, this is how you got here and this is who you were, you're going to get, I can't imagine, I remember the discussions amongst the cast. I cannot imagine what it was like for the writers and the producers and the directors, so.
Yeah, I mean, I end up having to do quite a lot of homework for this episode because I discovered I was a junkie.
You did not know you were an addict previously?
I had pitched them a drinking problem. And Paul was like, I'll see your drinking problem and I will raise you some heroin. So yeah, I gave myself homework. And I think actually Greg and I talked about it. I read Junkie, the Williams S. Burroughs book on heroin addiction. And I actually watched Requiem for a Dream, which to this day is the hardest movie I've ever had to watch. It felt like being punched in the face.
That's a rough one.
Brilliant, but painful. Okay, so let's get to the index that we can bring on our wonderful guest.
Great. The Adelstein Index for episode 116, Brothers Keeper. Brothers Keeper premiered on April 3, 2006, was written by Zach Estrin and directed by our guest today, Greg Yaitanes. 8.10 million people tuned in that Monday night at 8 o'clock. And also, at that time, we were up against a rerun of Wife Swap on ABC, a rerun of 2.5 Men on CBS, and Deal or No Deal on NBC.
The TVGuide.com recap reads, a flashback episode reveals details about the crime that landed Link on death row, explains Michael's motives for helping his brother, and looks at reasons why other characters wound up at Fox River. For Sarah, the road began in a hospital's drug dispensary. Sucre needed a wedding ring for Mary Cruz. C-Note got a taste of military injustice, and Teabag found love for a while.
Around the world at that time, on April 3rd, for the first time since its independence from Britain in 1931, women in Kuwait were permitted to vote and run for office. And of the turnout that day, over half of the voters were women. Also on April 3rd, Netflix launched its lawsuit against Blockbuster, claiming infringements on its patent rights, saying that Blockbuster copied its patent-based business methods.
Moving on to pop culture, top of the movie box office was Spike Lee's Inside Man, starring Denzel Washington.
One of my all-time faves, by the way.
It's amazing. Starring Denzel Washington and Jodie Foster. Fantastic film. It grossed $29 million in its opening weekend, which feels like a low opening weekend now, but hashtag inflation, I suppose.
Well. Okay.
Gnarls Barkley's song Crazy was climbing the charts off an album that would win the 2007 Grammy for Album of the Year. And this I knew nothing about, but I'm just so excited about it. On MTV, Wilmer Valderrama hosted a brand new show called Yo Mama, featuring amateur comedians in head-to-head battles telling the most creative and hilarious insult jokes. Paul, when we are done with this show,
we're going to watch on that.
Do a rewatch of Yo Mama because I've never heard of it, but I'm all in.
How about instead we just go watch the episode and we replay our highlights from that, and then we can get to interviewing Greg.
Good idea. Here we go.
This is really stupid, but you're going to say it's not stupid, which is one of the reasons I love you. We need to write a phonetic pronunciation of my last name. I don't think that Michael and Veronica could have children because their eyes would be so bright that like people would be blinded by looking at them.
It's a good director who looks at an actor's hands.
I'm seeing this really cute drug addict.
Also, I feel a little bad for this actor. This is like a whole audition, and we only get her face for like 30 seconds.
Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Our guest today has won Emmys for directing episodes of both House and House of the Dragon. His career is massive and impressive, and we'll just give you some highlights. But he started on Soldier of Fortune back in the 90s, directed, oddly, an episode of The Invisible Man, also called Brother's Keeper, and has worked on Bones, Grey's Anatomy, did 30 episodes of House, 20 of Banshee.
Jesus.
It goes on and on and on.
And we loved him. He was one of our
Yes,
favorites. Don't tell the other
absolutely.
directors. He did 3 episodes of Prison Break, including some serious torture scenes between Paul and I in season 2. Greg, welcome to Prison Breaking.
Thank you. How cool you guys are having this. I think I texted you the
It's
day
been
that
super
the press article came out.
You did. You did.
I'm like,
Aw,
what am I?
And I think you're at the top of our list of, okay, who are we going to have on this
What am I
show?
on?
And we're like, we have to have Yaitanes. We got to have Yaitanes.
Well, it's one of.
that was super exciting.
It is, across all that. Thank you for that lovely intro and for having me today. And across, I would put Brother's Keeper in my top 10 of all the episodes I've directed for sure. And it's
Really?
always, yeah. I mean, when I got the script for this, I was already a fan. I wanted to do the Prison Break pilot. I was already watching the show. I love the show. I specifically wanted to get on the show. And then when as a guest director, you parachute in and you don't know what your script's going to be until the night before you start work.
Mhm.
And that script came in and I was so excited. Like this Genesis pilot of how everybody got to where they went, and that drops you on the doorstep of the beginning of pilot episode.
Yeah, you kind of got your pilot in a way.
Yeah, I did. It really, I did, it's like how Spider-Man became Spider-Man, I wanted to know how all this worked. And what was interesting was you guys shot the pilot in the spring and we had to marry into certain costumes and things to track when it was minus 28. I remember being in the van scene with you and,
Yes.
that guy that plays C-Note's brother-in-law, Mike Jones, that day, that I still tell the story of that day when that guy was supposed to be on set and at call time, is nowhere to be found. And after finding he was a rapper, he hadn't done, this was one of his first acting jobs. And
Oh God, I remember
we got
this.
his manager and his thing, and we're in Chicago and nobody's awake. And we finally get somebody, and he never got on his plane from Texas. He was still in Texas when we were at call, and he was in the first scene of the day, which and it was minus 28 degrees. So when we had to, think on our feet and change kind of the geography, that whole scene where he takes him outside, that whole thing where he just where C-Note comes back and says that he's being deployed again. I had a whole different kind of physical structure and blocking to it.
Wow.
To get around.
But you had to shoot it without the actor.
We had to shoot it. We had to work. We had to kind of organically figure out how to make the scene work. You don't notice it, but I remember that day, and I remember you and I being in the van doing that scene by the park. It could not have been. I've never been so cold in my life during that shoot.
I don't think and I grew up there, and I don't think I've ever been that cold in my life either. I also remember it was did you shoot over Christmas break? Did you start before Christmas break and finish after or something? Or maybe it was just my Christmas break, but I remember it was very late at night and it was a Friday.
Yeah.
And we were shooting, and I tell this story all the time because
Always fun.
Now we're working on digital, but we were working on film that at one point you were shooting us in the van and the film snapped.
Oh,
from the cold. And they reloaded it and it snapped again. And then you guys were like, that's it, we're going home. We can't keep it going. And I was like, well, that is a first.
Yeah.
I mean, it was well below zero.
No, it was, I asked this question, the crew will shut down at minus 30, but I can't imagine minus 28 feels that much different than minus 30.
No.
And then when it got
especially
to
with the
zero,
wind.
I could have walked around in shorts. At one point I went to North Face, and they had this thing that was a full onesie that you could get. It was basically a sleeping bag. I came so close to getting that because I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up around the cold, but you realize, I would go from I'd walk to school, or I'd go to the bus, or I'd go from here to there. You don't stand outside for 14 hours in that weather.
Because we were noticing as we were watching it, I mean, your episode is 100% location, right? It must be really interesting to get a script and be like, oh, I'm excited to work on Prison Break. Just kidding. I'm okay.
Yeah.
But you were not ever in Fox River.
No, one scene.
Yes, and I remember
Once,
we did
oh,
once.
oh, 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 right.
Also, when we, I'm looking at the monitor, and Sarah, actually, you commented, you're like, it's so cool that it's just white behind you. We were actually in the cell block. I remember it was the first day I met Greg, and he was like,
Oh,
okay,
no
you're just
way.
looking at the monitor and just like blowing out the light and back. It was a very creative way to shoot that. Because it doesn't
It
need
was
to be
neat.
in any particular place, but it was like, I was like, oh, wow, I get to shoot in the cell block. Not that you'd know that that's where it was.
I know it
Yeah.
was cool.
So you had to do, I would imagine on a show like that with a relatively tight timeline, this has to have more locations than any other episode of the show by far in
For
season
sure.
one.
That was
It
the
has to.
biggest, the like logistical thing. One of the great things about Chicago was you could, on a short walk, go to a whole different kind of look. But like when we were, where we had T-Bag's love interest, she did a really beautiful job. I was trying to look up what her name was.
Mhm.
KK Dodds. I knew her from way back in the
Yeah,
day.
she was great. And, that house was around, like you could go out of that house and there was the alleyway where
Yep.
Sucre was. And so we would,
Yep.
we would find
Oh, that's
multiple
amazing.
looks without having to move around very much because we shot that in 8 days, and it was
Yeah,
a
it's incredible.
And you shot Kuwait.
Yeah, where was
shot
that?
Kuwait. So there's stock footage mixed with building a tent on
Sure.
stage. So there was, I
Okay.
think part of it was in Fox River when he's coming down the hallway and seeing the guy tortured.
Tortured,
And
sure, because he's in
then
a prison
we
cell.
did the tents on stage and opened them up and blasted the sun and did some heat, mirage ripples. We put the flame bar in front of the camera to kind of sell
Yeah.
that look and see that
It
story.
really works. And of course, the actor in me just sees no, he has no facial hair. On C note, he has no, like Nepper or Teabag, he has no facial hair in this. Like, that's always the thing you got to put in the schedule too. It's like, when are we shooting these guys so they can be
Right.
ready for the next
It can
episode or
be-
for whatever the
It was
thing.
so great to
And
have
it's
that.
Continuity.
Yeah.
It's super effective. I mean, the
It
snap
looks so
from
different.
Chicago, which looks just so cold. I mean, the breath disappears so fast. And then to cut to Kuwait, you really felt the difference. The sweat was great. Like you said, the weight
Yeah.
and heat was great. It really sold.
Those
it really
things were,
sticks.
you know,
It
Scott-
feels huge.
Scott Eilers edited it, and he and I, like, he was so excited to get the footage, and it was temp. It's funny, it was temp. I saw. It was nice to hear the music had followed some of the temp, but there was a lot of gravity around the episode. Like it was
Yeah.
important. It
Mhm.
had an opportunity to be stylistically different. It's funny when I was watching it, and I was remembering that I like lamented after I wrapped that I didn't. When to your point about shaving, I should have had a scene with Michael shirtless because you had only ever seen him in his tattoos, and there was opportunities when he was working the crazy wall to have him shirtless, looking
Yeah.
over the material or something.
But there's
Although
even one
Sarah
shot.
noticed, Sarah
Yeah, where
commented.
his sleeves are rolled up.
Yeah.
And it was sort of wonderful because you see his bare arm, but you didn't make a meal out of it. It was just,
Yeah.
This is the guy before the thing. And it stood out to me all these years later.
Greg, you have such a calm, as a director and as a man, you have such a calm way about you. And it's an intense show, and it was an intense group of actors playing intense. I mean, this episode is not just a flashback. Here's what happened, how you got here, but everybody has some kind of turn that is like an enormous moment in their life. They're getting engaged, they're getting arrested, they're a drug addict, they're all these things. I would imagine that the amount of energy coming towards you from the actors needing answers, essentially, must have been overwhelming. I'm sure so my question is, Zach Estrin, who wrote it, and Olmsted and Shuring, who were, I guess, running it at the time, were they involved in those conversations with the actors? Were you the first line of information there? Because, like you said, you come in and hit the ground running. It's not your show. You haven't been there. You don't have these relationships. How did you deal with that kind of onslaught?
I think, if I remember correctly too, I think I really do try to kind of calibrate my compass to the people that I'm working with and see what are the needs of me. That's what I think made me a successful episodic director was I understood I was making, 1/22nd of the bigger, piece, and how to be able to show up and let them worry about the next thing that was coming down. And so I was so excited when I had read this, and then, really met Zach, got on, like House on Fire, just got like, it was great. And there was a
He's
real,
so lovely.
it really was like, and we'll talk more about Zach in a little, and 'cause
Mhm.
it's, I think, the secret sauce of what made that work was it was a willingness to listen to ideas and be able to bring ideas to the table. And interestingly, I think it's sometimes what was easier about this than other episodes is there was none of the relationships and history and what's already been established to work from. Everything was new, and you were
Mm.
dealing
Oh,
with,
interesting.
human relationships and stories, and we could take things as they were happening. And I thought the relationships were pretty clear. There was, when I was working with Nepa, he was when Bob was, uh, when we were working on that scene, we worked out little, because I had also been watching the show. I think that's important as a director. You need to be as caught up
Yeah.
with a show as possible. And there was only, I think, were we episode 13? There was like, I saw as much as I
It was
could.
episode 16, but I'm
16.
sure they hadn't cut together
So I've been
13,
watching
14,
what's aired,
15.
and I was able to, but again, I didn't need the last few episodes to know where to drop in because it was all fresh. But
Right.
I remember Bob, there was a great scene where Teabag, when he's teaching the multiplication game, and the little girl like kind of moves his finger down, and you just see him like look, and you just, I remember talking to Bob that
Mhm.
in the slightest of way that activates for him, that his, proclivities and
Mhm.
such. And we could just see that even if he has a kind of lid on the monster right now, that it was like kind of like a doorbell to it. And so,
Mhm. Mhm.
and Sarah, like our conversation about, like, it was just, you were ready to dive in. I think when people are game, like there was nothing more fun. Like you were game, and you were ready to talk about it, and to talk about like, and you, like, in watching that performance and your pale skin, and like, and Joe was in it, who I've worked with since a couple of
Mhm.
times.
Yeah.
Was
Terrific
great.
actor.
I totally forgot that Joe was in that and like was your boyfriend. So,
Mhm.
um,
Well,
but it was great. It was just great to
I
see
mean,
that you dove in at first. Everybody did.
but there was, I mean, first of all, I think for a lot of us, there was it was such a new kind of work for the show, which was wonderful. Like Paul and I talk about this a lot. I was kind of on my own show with Wentworth. We were in like a 2-person
Yeah.
romantic drama up in the thing. And now all of a sudden there's this backstory, which is really cool. But it also was a contentious episode. I mean, I remember, and I don't know how much of this, I went through my script. I have the pink pages and a couple of things that stood out. I remember there being a big controversy, and I don't know if this was involving you or just the writers, but about a kiss between Michael and Veronica, and the implication that he didn't pick up the phone because he was sleeping with Lincoln's ex-girlfriend. And there
Oh,
was a
yeah.
huge, like, that was in the original
Yeah.
draft.
I remember
She
that.
stumbles in, they kiss, and I think it was like clothes start coming off, and then we're close up on a phone that Michael doesn't answer. And I know there were a lot of really strong feelings from Wentworth and Dominic, and I think even Robin, although I don't remember that as well,
Mhm.
about like, hold on. If this whole thing is being done out of the guilt of I slept with your girlfriend,
Mm.
it feels much cheaper than it does if this is being done out of you put your life on the line to borrow money so that I could have a better life.
Yeah.
The nobility, and that was always in there, but the nobility of that, untainted by,
Well, what
I
was
was also,
great is that was addressed ahead of shooting. Like when it's the day of, and
okay.
those conversations
Yeah.
happen,
But
are
Oh,
horrible.
yeah.
Because you don't, and there, what's great is there was an
Mhm.
opportunity to bring up the life insurance, to be able to make it a deliberate switch rather than, being there on
Mhm.
stage and paralyzed because nobody wants to do the scene because this is just finally hit somebody. And by the way, it was a great
Mhm.
note, and great ideas come. And why I came back
Totally.
every year was it's an environment that you can collaborate in. I think that's what you want. So sometimes I've been really lucky that I haven't been on a show where it's just like, you're the guest director and I'm this. I've just like I know I've heard about those shows. I've managed to avoid, those kind of situations. And Prison Break was always collaborative, especially when you then have the trust of everybody after doing Brothers Keeper to come back and to come back. I think that was, great. Unfortunately, I didn't I was looking to see if I had photos. I think I had the iPhone when I did my second episode in Texas. So I had photos with Wentworth and stuff on set. My sister came down to set, and then I remember the next time I came back, I have photos of Jody and Dom and everybody. I think the other thing is everybody's, pressure testing you a little bit. I remember Dom being the most, one to see what I would do, would try to throw things in my lap. And Chris Manley shot that, and we stayed close after we worked together a couple of times.
Chris is terrific, DP.
Yeah, he was great.
Did you have a writer? Was there a writer on set? Because I don't remember Prison Break doing that. Actually, was Zach there? Was Paul
Zach
there? Or
was
anybody?
not. Zach was there when we were in Texas. I remember because he wrote my next episode as well, or he was at least down there as producer.
Right.
I don't feel like Zach was there. He might have come in, but I don't have a memory of that. But I have a lot of sort of memory of conversation and texting and staying in touch about it. And he was, super supportive. I think us too, I think everybody was also excited to be out of the prison, for something. So it was kind of a, recess for everybody. So everybody came in really wanting to do a good job and to be able to have great material to sink their teeth into. I mean, Zach wrote a great script with great dilemmas. And in watching it, I was impressed with its efficiency, how it covered so much. And you never, if this was the pilot to Prison Break, it was great. I remember, even down to, I remember, talking to Went about how to handle that last scene, and that I didn't want to see his face when I shot just him walking up to the guns and pausing, because you would know when you see him putting on the suit from the pilot and see the two guns, that would be enough. I got some guff that there wasn't a shot because they wanted to cut to his face, but I think I think the cinema of it played perfect how it was.
Now, I noticed looking at my little pink pages here, there's a scene, and I can't remember if you shot it or if it was cut before. The teaser of this episode was a flashback to young Lincoln, young Michael, young Veronica.
Yes, we shot
Michael
that.
and Lincoln being kicked out of their house. Okay, so you want to just set the scene a little bit in terms of what that scene was.
I know that it was. I know that we did it because that's where the flashes were taken from that happened.
Right, in the court.
In the court.
Course, yeah,
So
courthouse.
that's what became of that. But I remember shooting, with young everybody, but I did not remember that. I don't remember the specific construct around that deleted scene.
And the boys were cast already, because there was the lakefront scenes earlier in the season. I don't know if there was a Veronica cast, but you must have cast that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it starts with two boys, 11 and 15. And what's interesting about it is it sets up, so it starts with Michael and Lincoln at 11 and 15 hiding in a room. And then you realize they're at Veronica's house. They don't have any place else to go. And she's arguing with her dad about no, let them stay. And he's like, they're not our problem. And then he goes, I'm going to call social services. And Link goes, come on, Mike, we're not going to a foster home. And it's really interesting because it sets up this dynamic between the three of them.
Yeah.
Also incredibly hard to do that kind of work with young actors who've really only done one scene together. But I'd forgotten all about it. And I flipped to the first pages of my episode and I was like, oh, I didn't remember it from the cut. So I wasn't sure if you'd cut it or if
I remember. No, I think it was, I turned in a pretty hearty director's cut. I think there's some other stuff that either was tightened or not there, because there was a lot.
It's a 54-page script.
Yeah, and it came out. I would not be surprised if the director's cut was close to that length of time. It was all in there.
Yeah.
I remember when I put it on a couple of days ago that I was surprised at how it opened, and I'm like, when I was like, I don't remember that being just because I think I'm always looking for like, what's the way into the episode? And I think I might have approached, Lincoln, who again had to be like at minus 20 degrees in a t-shirt and a leather jacket. And Dom added that line where he's like, he's like, how you doing, Link? And he's like, cool. Like it was, that was real. And, but there's the, he walks out of that scene and he goes onto the stage to his set where the goons are pressuring him. But Dom's like, I'm going to chew gum in this scene. And I'm like, you can't chew gum in this scene because we just saw you on the other side of the door. And it's, no, man, I could have put it in at the door. I'm like, you can't chew this scene. Like, those what I was talking about when it was like my first day with him. And he was testing me with, but he was like, gum's real life, man. I'm like, I'm with you. We could totally do it if we just didn't see you on the other side of that door, which we just did, and you weren't chewing gum.
Right.
Like we should have done it outside
immediately
with the scene with Lincoln. But yeah, gum's real life, man. Still, I think sometimes and I will text that to each other. But it was, just like it's always that negotiation. I think that is the tricky part of being a guest director is that you want to respect the customs and the culture of where you're visiting. But you're also sort of the visiting dignitary and your title comes with certain authority. So you're balancing asserting that authority and having to lead the crew because they want to be led and actors want to be directed. And, and then you always, you can do your best and you're going to grind a little bit. And on shows, you're going to find people that just don't want the input, and I just try to be there an audience. I also like respect when somebody doesn't want the input. I can only do so much and it's, and just one of the more freeing aspects of it is like, if we want to play and talk and build and try ideas, like we're gonna have a great time. If we want to dig in and, have that be there, it's not, the ideas don't flow. I think that it's all about like what we can do together and how we can try to solve it together. And I love like, and especially with TV and especially the schedule, there wasn't a lot of time. Like one of the things I really was very happy with when I saw it and was glad that I still regarded it so well was like how well everybody dropped in. Like I really think like, your Sarah's junkie storyline was fantastic. Like shooting up in the hospital was great, kind of like being like, dealing with that, the scene with the guy that got hit by the car and just that paralysis in that moment that led to her sobriety. I thought all of that read so well and played so well. Like I was like I was watching it like I wouldn't shoot it. I wouldn't do anything different with so many of these scenes.
That's cool. I mean, what was interesting to me, if I'm remembering right, you were the first director in my career, which at that point was very short, who called me before we started shooting and was like, hi, my name is Greg. I'm going to be directing the next episode. Want to talk to you about some of these scenes. And my like little theater geek heart was like, oh my God, I found my people. And it was beautiful for me too, because like, I mean, I joke that I'm the only member of the Screen Actors Guild who's never seen a line of cocaine. Like I don't know drugs. I just don't. I grew up in a household in chaos, and the idea of adding more chaos into my life just never. I was like, no. And so I'm reading these scenes and I was like, I don't know how to do this. And I found a piece of paper where, I think you were the one that suggested, like, read Junkie, watch Requiem for a Dream. And it was super helpful. It was super helpful. And I remembered something watching it that when I was in grad school, we all drank a bit too much because we were theater geeks, and there was a theater bar where we basically drank for free. And I was in school in Denver, and I remember getting behind the wheel of my car thinking, I probably shouldn't be driving, but there's a blizzard and I got to get home. And I'm driving home through Denver, and out of nowhere, a block from my house materializes a family of 4 in the street. And you can't slam on your brakes. They got out of the way. And I remember parking my car, and I was like, well, that's it. That's it. Yeah. I'm never in my life. Like, that was my one gift from the universe or God or my ancestors or whatever you believe in. That was your congratulations, you didn't just kill a family of 4
my
moment.
goodness.
And I remember you kind of digging around with me as we were talking on set about like, what is this moment? This moment where you see there's a right and a left.
Yeah.
But you're taking one of those paths. And in the hands of a director who was more interested in the shot list than the performances, I think this would have been a very different episode. So, you know,
I agree. I
grateful.
think one of
That's what I'm
the
saying.
pleasures is when you can, and actually, you know, I would credit this episode too for what kind of genre pieces I pursued going forward, because there was, you know, a sense of community and family to the story, and I look for those themes. House of the Dragon being a perfect example. You know, there's at the very basis of that, you know, I could understand Viserys' story because, you know, I was single dad to a daughter, and so was he. You know, forget the dragons, forget the palace, forget the thing, the very human
Right.
nature of it. And still yet, like, I think, you know, getting to work with cast and still have the genre moments and the visual moments of his architecture firm and some of the things that I thought really still looked really great, you know, all these years later is exciting, but they don't have to come at the expense of the other. I think, you know, it's one of the things I love in that scene when the guy gets hit by the car and you make that choice, like Joe pulls you away and then you kind of turn around and kind of fall to your knees. Like it really hits you. Like they could have easily, I'm glad the producers didn't cut out, like stayed with you on that. Like that's an important, that was a moment. And when you turn in your director's cut and leave, just because that's the way the process works, you hope for the best. And I think everybody, I remember Scott, the editor, was also like throwing himself on the, you know, like you can't cut this or you can't change this part or this thing would go. So he was a real advocate in my absence, and I would check in to see kind of, you know, how the cut was coming. It was one of the times where I stayed in touch with Post, and Post was really receptive, just showing me the progress of the cuts because I wanted to be able to, you know, defend, you know, or explain why something was important. And I think, and we had that kind of dialogue on that show.
And with that, we'll be right back.
All right, welcome back, everyone.
When you are talking to the producers and the writers about this, so before you're dealing with the cast, before you're even designing your days and all that thing, Sarah and I both remarked about how strong the connective tissue of theme is in this episode. That it's not just the backstory of, oh, all these people hit rock bottom, or all these people by the wheels of the universe ended up being in each other's lives because of mistakes they'd made. But so much of what's motivating them is family.
Yeah.
Obviously, Lincoln and obviously
do the right
Lincoln
thing by family.
Lincoln and Michael, C-Note, even Teabag to a certain degree. There is this sense,
Sucre,
although insane as it may be, that he had an opportunity in his own twisted mind of having a family. You know, or he said, I love, like that maybe there was this way. And it really comes across. And is that something that you just took from the script on its face? Was it conscious on, I mean, obviously it was conscious on the writer's part, but was it communicated directly to you? Like Sarah's directed, I've directed now. And, you know, sometimes you sit in a tone meeting with the writers and producers and they just say, make sure this scene is scary, make sure this scene is sexy. And they don't give you this larger sense, and that's for you to pull out. Was that something that was conscious, consciously discussed?
I feel like not necessarily. I do think that often tone meetings are done scene to scene, sometimes not holistically what the, you know, I'm often, those are the questions I'm asking, like what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the story you're really wanting to tell? And I think I felt, or what I grabbed onto, you know, was, you know, I love, and again, you know, it's what I would continue to chase in Quarry, same thing. It's like, I'm interested in marriages, even the show I just did for Apple, Presumed Innocent, like what a family does in peril or in crisis and how people react. Like, you know, I'm like infinitely fascinated by those areas. And this was, you know, the tipping point of crisis for everybody's relationships and what could survive that and what do you have to do to survive, and how, you know, I was actually really moved by Rockman's speech to Mike Jones about like, like she married a military man. Like, how long is she gonna stay if I'm just, one of them, that I'm just a criminal. And being in those places, plus everybody, rose up to play that and came ready with ideas, which is also great, But in the tone meeting specifically, I feel like a lot of stuff is like plot or sort of what they hope to accomplish. And I feel like some of those conversations were more just kind of ongoing with me and Zach because we were in touch a lot during that episode.
Sure.
And then, of course, talking to the cast and trying to get a little bit of a head start before we got there on the day and just, make that go as smooth as possible. Plus, you're flying to location, and you're in a hotel, it's freezing, I have to tell you, on a production level, to you guys as directors, one thing I learned that I've taken with me since is never go from cold to warm. When we went from shooting the alleyways outside or doing all the stuff with Sucre and the proposing and all that, and then went inside to Teabag's house, like everybody couldn't activate. Like they were like,
fell asleep.
Like we had just rescued them.
Oh, wow.
Like they were inside. They're like, nobody could do anything. Like an hour was lost just trying to get people to like be like, okay, I'm not dead. I'm like, my body's warming up. So go from warm to cold. I would have.
I like that tip.
So, I would have reversed that day 100%. There was no reason to not be able to. So I would have 100% done that.
That is a good
trick because
good tip.
I would think my instinct would say absolutely the opposite, which is like, here's your motivation. Like you get to, let's power through this so we get to go inside.
It was more the crew. It's just like, it was.
Yeah, I know. People would just fall asleep.
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, because the exhaustion of trying to do your job outside. I mean, I remember we shot a scene on a jetty that's coming up in a couple episodes. And I mean, the scene couldn't be 60 seconds long.
Right.
But standing outside, with waiting to shoot it, whatever, we were probably out there for an hour. I took like a 6-hour nap when I got home because your whole body is going, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die.
Yeah. It's exhausting.
True.
It's crazy.
So true.
Greg, what was the architecture firm? What building was that? I was trying to identify it.
We were trying to figure that out.
It was a cool
those
space.
crazy windows, those crazy
round windows.
They almost look like submarine windows.
Yeah.
When they showed me that building, I loved it. I love the 2 levels. I love that there was already kind of an existing firm and desks and things were already there. Like we were going to somebody else's office situation, and there was I could see a lot of again to sort of mirror this very structured life, when Wentworth shows up with his like earmuffs and his coat in the very first scene,
beautiful camera.
And I thought though all that would lend itself to, again, like anywhere I could tell in his story that this guy, that he was about to do, for him to do something this crazy and to get this far out of his comfort zone. And, but to that end, like I love that when we had that his architect, it was so clever that his architect firm was the one that was, had done the design for Fox River and trying to first plan to try to memorize everything. And then I remember weirdly when I was watching it, I was like, oh, I really remember that scene when the girl comes with the food delivery and has all the tattoos, and he's like, checking it. It's like, it's all sort of the wheels are starting to turn and how to do that, so.
There's beautiful moments throughout about this sort of random things that happen that land you where you are. I mean, even Lincoln running by Sucre.
Yeah, I love that. I love the little
hitting him in the thing. The sense that like it could so easily have gone otherwise.
Yeah.
Any of these little moments could have pivoted things. I had a question for you. I've been trying to do some dates on this. Were you shooting when the Golden Globes were announced? Was that during your episode?
That was the day. That was the Gums Real Life day. The Wentworth had a Globe nomination, and it like kind of threw a whole cultural.
And so did the show.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Like it
right.
Was So I remember that day. I remember that exact day. I remember that morning.
What was nominated? The Wentworth and the show? Was it just Wentworth?
Yeah, the show was nominated for Best Drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out years later that there's always one season 1 show nominated for Best Drama at the Golden Globes.
Oh, really?
And like, a buddy of mine, Adrian Pazdar, was like, yeah, we got it our first year on Heroes. Like, there's always one show That's one breakout show.
We had that on House of the Dragon. We had season 1. We won the Globe for season 1.
Yes, you did.
We did not win. But I wonder, did we? I'm about to, I apologize because I threw a little tiny party, but I don't remember if we invited you because you were a guest director. We went to, so we went to.
Invest in that guy. I'm not gonna know that guy in 10 years. It's not gonna be
He
on
didn't
my
direct
it's not
it.
gonna be on my podcast someday.
Yeah.
I apologize
What's a
for this.
podcast?
I just invented it.
We went to, and I had this thing, I mean, Paul and I've talked about this. I had this thing where I was like, I'm going to create community because I'd come off this show where there was a lot of antagonism. And I was like, no, I want this to be a family.
Mm-hmm.
It did not work as well on Prison Break as I wanted it to, but I still gave it the old college try. And I called the House of Blues because I'd heard that they had a private room. And I was like, can we get your private room for the night? And the guy was like, who is this? I was like, we were just nominated for a Golden Globe. I'd like to have a place that we could all hang out. But Wentworth and Dom had already gotten pretty freaking famous. And so you couldn't just go to a bar with them.
Right.
And so we went to, and Kevin Hooks was relatively new to the show. He'd done a handful of episodes. And I remember I think it was just actors. And towards the end of it, Hooks showed up. And it was a really nice night. Like, it was still that like, oh my God, you guys, people are watching the show. Oh my God, you guys, we got nominated for an award. And it was an award I'd heard of.
Right.
Years later for Walking Dead, I got nominated for like 6 awards I'd never heard of. I was like, the Scream Awards. Like, what is this? But I'd heard of the Golden Globes. And Hooks walked in and we're like, a producer just walked in the door. And Amaury and I looked at each other. And I was like, you're thinking what I'm thinking. And God love him, we left him with the bill.
No.
But Hooks on the hook.
We're like,
oh my goodness.
Gotta have a corporate credit card. And he was like, is this up? And I was like, come on, you can produce us a party. He's like, all right.
Season 1, come on.
Party.
Yeah. Gary
Back
Brown
when producers
loved getting that receipt.
Yeah.
Well, especially because it was for a bunch of booze for actors, which I guess you can't do anymore.
Oh my God.
But it was, I mean, you really were there at a pivotal time, right? I mean, because it's a moment where.
Yeah, I do. But I was not at your party. No, I was not invited. But
I apologize retroactively.
It's okay.
15 years later, or 2019.
I would have gone too, because I was because I was shooting, but I probably would have come by, see what was going on.
I have so many recollections from that party. Not that it didn't get crazy or anything, but I just remember things that I probably wouldn't discuss. I mean, I guess we can discuss and cut them out. I get to edit this thing anyway. But I remember Marshall announcing that he was getting married or had gotten married by jumping out of an airplane.
Right. We got to ask Marshall about that when he comes on. That's
I remember
they jumped out of a plane.
Wife, maybe now ex-wife, showing us her new Rockman tattoo, which was enormous and across her lower back.
Oh.
And that's a lot of letters. And then like 2 weeks later being like, oh yeah, it's not working out. And be like, oh, what about, I just wanted to be like, oh, what about the tattoo?
I also remember her being one of the most beautiful men I'd ever met. Like she and Josh, my husband and the two of them, the 4 of us went out one night, like to dinner and bowling or something. You know, it was like, we're in Chicago, we don't know anybody. And I remember they walked through the door and I was like, hey, is that the most beautiful on God's great earth? And he was like, yeah, that's her. And she was like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a model. And we were like, yeah, I know.
Yes,
I know. That's how that works out.
Before we
tattoos and marriages.
Going back to something, I think like those kind of things, like I've come to appreciate when people are trying to build community. Like there's, when everybody gathers, especially when you're on location, I think it's much easier when you're in the town, like when you're in LA and everybody's going home to their families. It's really like on House of the Dragon, besides, kind of coming on the tail end of COVID and coming out of that, it was hard because all the cast live there. They go back to their home. It's hard to, but when we were all on location in Portugal, it was great because we're all in the same hotel and we all got to hang out. And those opportunities, I think, are important as a creative community. And I know that, when you get busy, when you're busy directing, it's great when somebody is handling that or sort of organizing that, or those things are happening and that sense of community is going on. And it's what actually,
especially when they're such a jerk that they don't invite you. I'm going to keep apologizing for this for a while.
That's all right.
I also think to your point, Greg,
I'm so sorry.
We've all been on both kinds of shows. I mean, there are shows where it's kind of built into the show where you're going to be spending tons and tons of time together on set. And that could create a sense of family. Hopefully, if it's a healthy group of people, even if you're going home at night. But a show like Prison Break, for instance, I think that Golden Globes party was certainly the first time I had been in the same room as the entire cast at once. You know, there was no table reads. There was no, maybe there was, I think there was a dinner here before we all went to Chicago, here in Los Angeles, that is. But I had not spent time as a group. And so it takes some effort, and especially on location.
And it was before the very weird Christmas party that Robin and I threw, which was far less successful.
It wasn't.
I disagree. That was amazing.
Exactly, because you weren't there. Wait, before we move on to like fan questions and stuff, which we've got to do in a little bit, but I have a question that I wanted to ask you for a very long time.
Okay.
And it's about House.
Okay.
So shortly after, I think season 2, I was no longer on the show, or I guess I would end up coming back to the show, but I was no longer on the show. And I'm standing at a gas station, filling up my car in Los Angeles, and I get a call from, I think, my reps saying, hey, you have an offer for an episode of House that shoots tomorrow. We kind of need a yes or no. And I was like, I'm at a gas station. Let me get home and read the thing. And they're like, we really don't have time for that.
Wow.
Greg Yaitanes is directing it. He, gave us your name or whatever. He thinks you're right for this. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, fine. I trust Greg. At this point, we'd done that episode in season 2, which hopefully we talk about next season.
Yes.
On this podcast. And we built up a ton of trust. I get home and I read the script and I was like, well, Greg me for this, because it opens with a woman in bed with a man who turns out not to be her husband, and she's in this open relationship. The episode was called Open and Shut. And I read this script and I was like, what? Greg sees in me. And I've been wanting to ask you for all these years, like, were you just so desperate you auditioned every other 5-et brunette in LA and you were just like, they were busy?
No,
like,
I mean, there was probably, I think that this happens. I mean, I think
it's literally she's in bed with the other man, and then her husband knocks on the door, and she's like, "Oh, this is awkward." And I was like, "It's Greg need me to do this."
Yeah, here's why. I feel that there was definitely like a process on House, like we used to have in-person casting, and so you would have those. You'd have like a day of prep was dedicated to casting, which was great, and. We had that experience, and as I'm sitting there in casting and not seeing it, I'm like, Sarah Wayne Callies would be perfect for that. Like, I was like thinking about our experience. I was thinking about what you did with Brother's Keeper, what we had done on the show, and then, plus two, like I like working with my friends and people I like, and getting to, to do it again. And when you have that, and I had Wentworth on House as well. It was, it's fun for me to reunite with someone, and it's, sometimes when you're sitting in casting and you're not finding what you need, you are thinking about, other relationships and other things. And, I don't think there's anything I can throw at you that you couldn't do. So
fair enough. It's a very, very polite answer. I'm also grateful to you for introducing me to the David Short Camp, because the first 3 episodes I directed were all for Good Doctor. So
great.
Many, many, many. I'm super, super grateful. But it was a funny, like my agent, when we sat down and read the script, he goes, is there some, why is he thinking about you for this?
It's and I was like, acting.
None of your business.
That was
yeah,
like
I know,
100%.
but I mean,
it's not a polite answer.
You've gotten scripts where you're like, ow, you really want, I'm the, really? I did an episode of I did a few episodes of Letterkenny, and I love the show, but they wrote me a role for a Mennonite named Anita Dick. And I was like, it's funny the way you appear to people.
I always like when I get something that's like out of my usual wheelhouse, or I'm always like, I'm interested to know why I got the call for it, or why they wanted to sit down with me. I'm as interested as, because that helps me also understand what, again, how to find my way into the material, but somebody saw, House had more jokes than most, comedies do. So, with going to, I did Banshee with Jonathan Tropper. We're reuniting for Your Friends and Neighbors. And again, that has a lot of that kind of drama mixed with, comedic elements of that. It was like,
Mhm.
that's what he could point to.
For sure.
And I like when I get a call that's like, I'm like, like I wouldn't expect to get this piece of material.
Mhm.
And then there's the stuff that is very easy math. You've done Big Show with Dragons. You're going to get, this big crazy logistical
Big show with
thing.
wolves.
Big Show with Monster. Yeah.
Big Show with
Show
Monster. Yeah. And then there's
So-
there's usually the
Marvel
call
will
is
call you
like,
next week.
yeah, Big Show with Monster that is in trouble and needs like somebody to come in and help the show. And
Right.
usually that is often the frequent.
That's high praise, though.
It is. It
That's
is
high
high
praise.
praise. It is nice to get. So,
But this is a town. This is a business that likes to niche because no everyone likes a sure thing. So it's like I know Sarah can play a Mennonite or somebody in a polyamorous relationship. I know Greg can
Or a
fix a
junkie.
monster show or a junkie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before
Pigeonholed
we
again.
and it's also
Before we move
it's
on.
a quality and a texture to your work that I'm like, this is going like Sarah's going to make this interesting. Like that's and so like and it probably wasn't the day before it was decided. It was like as it went through the getting David Shore familiar with your work and explaining doing some of the matrix of things. It sometimes comes down to the wire. Plus, too, like remember everything like you had 7 days to prep an episode of House. Like between having an idea and executing on it, you're practically shooting. So
Yeah, and I mean the in-person casting is interesting because now so often we come onto an episode and day one of prep, they're like, here are our top 10 people for the following roles because they've been seeing people
right
before you even sort of show up. And I mean,
I miss it because
there's a real estate issue there.
There is, and like somehow prep, as the shows have gotten bigger, prep has gotten bigger, and that space, at the Directors Guild, I'm on the negotiating committee, and we've tried to bring it back or bring a version of it back or an option for it back, and it's extremely hard. But what I miss from it in more of my episodic directing days was the ability to kind of use it as like when you found the person that was probably going to be being able to almost rehearse on the spot there, and be able to like work some of the things and try out ideas there ahead of the day. And you don't, I think Cast It is amazing in that the world has gotten smaller and you can be almost anywhere. And, we found Ant Star for Banshee, like, because, a tape had come in from Australia through New Zealand to us, and it had taken a long time to travel, but it was but because of this remote net that could be cast now, there was more opportunity. But what gets lost is some of the human aspect of it and trying to find that time to do that work.
And notes and somatic connection. I think that's I've been directing. It's like sometimes if you have to cast off tape, sometimes you don't know if there's like you said, like a looseness on their feet.
Yeah.
Or whether we speak the same language, which is always a little bit of a risk. So
the show I just did with Jake, it was his first time doing TV for Presumed Innocent, and he read with anybody he was going to be acting against, like just to be able to, like, if we narrowed it down and sort of had a few people and like this who we're thinking of, he'd wanted to get right on a Zoom and see what, again, to see like what's that experience going to be like, what happens when I want to, throw it out after 3 takes and try something totally different. Can they, can they roll? And by the way, like, great. Like, I loved it. Like, welcomed it, loved it. I think chemistry reads or
it's a great way to work.
Vibe reads, even over Zoom, like, it's better than nothing.
Okay, well, we've got a couple fan questions.
Yeah, we got some fan questions, and then we have one question for you before, 2 questions for you before you go. Yeah,
we have a wrap.
It's our little tradition. But we're going to take a quick break, and then we will be right back.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We have some fan questions. For Greg, some of these, let's see. So we have an Instagram at Prison Break Pod.
I follow it now.
People
Follows
left some
back.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. We follow you back.
We follow you back.
So we've got, let's see, Peppy Oliver Bell asked, did any of the characters' backstories change significantly? I think we answered that.
From when the first episode, when the production draft came out to when you were finally shooting, did anything change radically? Like, oh, Sucre wasn't going to hold up.
No, the script held up well. I think you called out sort of the biggest thing, which was the Lincoln, whether Michael slept with Veronica is probably the biggest thing. And I think there was a little more emphasis on flashback. Flashback, big flashback to the kids.
Oscaroo.z.1 asks, what's the scene that needed the most takes to get perfect? I think to refine that, I think what was maybe not technically the trickiest scene to shoot, but in terms of getting the relationship, the performance, or the dynamic of the scene right. Do you remember what took the longest or was the hardest, I should say?
I mean, one of the things about network TV was that there isn't time to indulge that. Like if you're really stuck on something, you have to know there's no wiggle room on a day of TV, as you both know. Like it has to come from somewhere else, and it's just a game of minutes. Yeah. And so I remember being concerned about Mike Jones because he was, the only non-actor
in Texas.
Well,
not present in
beyond the fact that he flew in, and we did manage to shoot that day. But it was, but I actually I was, I had wanted to reach out, couldn't get in touch. There was a lot of handling around that. And I remember his website being because I was like, "Who's Mike Jones?" And then his website is actually "Who is Mike Jones?" And
touche.
And I remember thinking that could be consuming, but he was a total natural. He was great. Yeah. Once I got him,
he's great in the show.
Yeah, I mean, Hooks dressed him down for not showing up and being in Texas. I watched that from a distance. That was great. And Hooks gave me that.
Which, by the way, a supervising producer is supposed to do. That's what you need your producing director to do.
To Mike Jones' credit, he apologized to everybody. He came to me to apologize. I said, you owe the apology to all the crew that was out for a 14-hour day on a Friday night. And that was the night that we were doing.
28-degree.
Paul in the van, he was cold.
Yep.
Yeah. But I thought he was there, and that was actually the area that I thought I was carving out more time for, but didn't turn out to need.
Okay.
All right, Greg.
What about this? Venomous. Can we do the venomous symbiotes question?
Sure, do it.
If you don't mind. It said, is there a character in the show you would have loved to direct the backstory for you were not able to do in Brothers Keeper? Just curious. There's no Westmoreland. There's no Abruzzi. There's no tweener.
Right.
Was there somebody looking back on it?
I mean, I would have,
fans want to know.
Bill Pitchner didn't come in until season 2, right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. And again, I remember when I was doing that stuff, I liked that story, but I think I would have
Mahone.
If there was more foresight to characters that would come in, I would have loved to have had more Easter eggs. You see Peter on a news clipping on the wall, but it would have been fun to
and
plant some of the other world building aspects. If any of that was known or could have been known at the time, I think that would have been exciting because I obsess on those things as a viewer.
Yeah. Somebody who doesn't show up until season 2 or 3. That would have been really
picking
cool.
the tattoos that we were going to see kind of being generated. Geeking out on that. That was all stuff that I was I want to see. I picked the tattoos that I wanted to see so that we could plant the future of or things you had already seen that were going on, so you started to understand.
As a viewer and a fan of the show, it is so satisfying.
Yeah,
to get to put all that stuff together.
You got to love the show to do it too. You got.
It's so fun to be in on. There's so much mystery in the show that once it's revealed, to then get to look back on it and feel like you're in on it. Yeah, it's just such a joy, and that's all over this episode.
Yeah.
Greg, it's always a joy to see you, and what a gift to get to talk through this with you. It's been really great. Thank you for being here.
Completely love it.
Remember, everyone, you can subscribe to our Watch Party episodes on the Patreon link on our show page, wherever you're listening right now. And our call-in question of the week, Greg, we have a call-in line because we're
an actual
old school
phone line.
telephone.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Yeah, that's right. We want your backstory for characters that are not in this flashback episode. Call in and tell them about Westmoreland, Abruzzi, tweener. You can go obscure if you want. Danny Hale, Nurse Katie, Avocado. Keep them short, like a haiku version, but please call us at 401-3P break. Prison break, not urine. Don't forget, 401-3P break. We'll play some of our favorites that you call in with down.
Just the letter P.
That looked better.
Just the letter P.
Paper.
Yeah, it's
really does.
a tough one.
It's one of those things you say out loud.
Yeah, okay. 401-3PB. Oh my God. 401-3PBREAK.
And Greg, okay, we have a little wrap up for our guests here.
By the way,
two questions
to your
for
point
you.
on the P break thing, the initials for House of the Dragon was Hot D, and then and everybody just be like, okay, Hot D, or they'd be texting Hot D, and you just
that's amazing.
I would die, and of course I'm like snickering, laughing, but
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Hot D. Oh no.
Hot D. Okay, so we have two questions that we wrap up with our guests. The first is, if you were on death row, what would your last meal be?
On death row, it would
Don't say hot D. Or do. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Live your life, man. I don't judge.
Could definitely be probably from Sushi Bark. I would get, the rundown if I could get that from. If anybody lives in LA, they'll get that. So
okay, our first sushi answer. That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
And then
drunken whale sake I won't be feeling nothing. There
you go. And here's our final. It's a fill in the blank, Greg. And it's comes in the form of advice to our listeners. And the advice is, don't get sent to prison, folks. But if you do get sent to prison, remember to
You're going to edit out the long pause?
Yep.
I wish I...
Take your time. Take your time.
Repeat the question again. Don't get sent to prison. When you do get sent to prison,
remember,
don't
folks,
forget.
Remember, folks, don't get sent to prison. But if you do get sent to prison, remember to...
Man, brush your teeth. Oral hygiene is
There you go.
critical.
Amazing.
If you don't take care of your teeth,
You don't take care of
what
your
do you
teeth,
have?
you don't got anything.
Yeah, you take care of your teeth, they take care of you. That's the
I'm a big believer in oral hygiene.
There you go. Great.
Sage advice from one of the great directors of the American Golden Age of television, ladies and gentlemen, two-time Emmy winner, Greg Yaitanes.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, friend.
Yeah, it's so great. Good.
Prison Breaking with Sarah and Paul is a Caliber Studio production. Your hosts have been friends, but not besties, Sarah Wayne Callies and Paul Adelstein. Our prison warden has been producer Ben Haber. Our head of Jailhouse Rock is Paul Adelstein, who made the music for this podcast. Keeping us slim and trim in the prison yard has been sound designer and editor, the great Jeff Schmidt. Keeping us up to date on the outside world is production assistant Drew Austin. Our prison artist, logo, and brand designer is John Nunziato and Little Big Brands. Check them out at www.littlebigBrands.com. Follow us on Instagram at Prison Break Podcast. Email us at prisonbreaking@caliber-studio.com and call us at 401-3PBREAK. Prison Breaking with Sarah and Paul has been a Caliber Studio production. Thank you